Okay, so let's have a look at the Moment Pro app. So this is an app for the iPhone, an iOS app, and it just allows you to use some manual features for your phone that you can't actually do in the native iPhone camera app. So you can use this for photography and videography, but in this lecture, I'm just going to show you how you can do this for video. So this app is really simple to use, and I'm going to give you an overview of it now. So just be aware that this is a paid app. At the time of filming this video, the app is for sale at £5.99. The price may be slightly different now or may be slightly different in your country, but just be aware this isn't a free app. But if you do want to make videos on your iPhone, I think it's a great way to utilize some of the features so you can really get the best video possible on your iPhone. If you are using an Android, there is a basic version of this app, but it doesn't give you as many video capabilities as the iPhone app. There is also the Filmic Pro app, which is also very good, but I just personally prefer how simple and easy to use this Moment Pro app is, so I'm going to show you this one as this is the one that I recommend. Also, some Android phones, such as the latest Huawei phones, also have some great manual features in their native camera app. However, for the iPhone, the features are mostly auto, and if you want to make some great videos, really we do have to use some of the manual features so we can really get the best video possible. Auto can be fine, but manual really does give us a few more options that we're going to look at in this video. So when you first launch the app, you may have to allow permission for the app to allow access to your camera roll, location, and microphone. And as we are shooting video, I will be showing you how to use this app in landscape, not portrait. But you can record videos in portrait as well, which may be useful for some social media platforms. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is click on this icon in the top right, and this allows us to choose our mode. So for this video, we're going to choose video mode. We do also have the photo mode, which is great, also slow shutter mode and time-lapse mode, which you may want to explore as well. Okay, so going back to the video mode, we do also have a few different presets which we can select. And we can even create our own preset, which we're going to be doing later on, which can be really useful if you're going to be shooting in the same location. You can just make your own preset and just use that each time. Okay, we also have this button in the top left, which is a circle button. This is if you're using any of Moment's phone lenses. I'm not currently using one of their lenses, so I'm going to select no lens. By the way, this doesn't actually change the video or image. All it does is add some information onto your file, so it's a bit easier to navigate and organize your files later on. Okay, and below this we can change the frames per second. I'm going to be shooting in 24 frames per second because it looks a bit more cinematic. However, if you're shooting something that's a bit more fast-paced, you could be shooting 30 frames per second or even 60 frames per second. With this app as well, you can also shoot in 120 or 240 frames per second, which you could use for slow motion. But you may have to drop your resolution from 4K to say 1080p. And below this, we can choose our resolution, 4K, 1080p and 720p. For this phone, if we want the higher frame rates, then we may need to drop the resolution down to 720p or 1080p. So for this video example, I'm going to be shooting in 4K at 24 frames per second. And then going down, we have some different color profiles. We have the default, and we also have flat and log. So these different color profiles will give your video a bit more of a cinematic look, but you won't get as much dynamic range. However, it can make your video look a bit more interesting or cinematic with these different color profiles. But for this, I'm just going to leave it on default. And then going down, we have the flash, which you can actually use as a light. So you can see here, if we have the flash on, it's going to be constantly on. So this can be useful if you're filming at night and you don't have a video light with you. You can also leave it in auto, or we can turn the flash off. But as I'm filming in daylight here, I'm not going to be using the flash. And we also have a histogram in the screen here, which can be a useful tool for balancing your exposure. Okay, and over on the right, we have a few manual settings, which include shutter speed, ISO, exposure, focus, and white balance. And when we select one of these different settings, there will be a dial that allows us to actually change these settings. Let's first scroll down and tap on the shutter speed. So for video, really we want to have our shutter speed number twice that of our frame rate. So we are going to be filming in 24 frames per second. So I'm going to select 1/48th of a second for my shutter speed. If we were to be filming in 30 frames per second, we should have our shutter speed at 1/60th. But for this, let's select 1/48th of a second for our shutter speed. Okay, then going up we have ISO. Ideally we want to have the lowest possible ISO, and as we are shooting outside with a lot of natural sunlight, we're going to select a low ISO. So the higher the ISO, basically the more artificial light you will have in your image, but it can add some noise and grain, so ideally we want to have a low ISO, but if you're shooting somewhere quite dark, you may want to increase the ISO, but for this example, let's have a low ISO to get the best possible image we can. Okay, and then we have exposure, which will basically make our image brighter or darker, but for this, I'm just going to leave this on 0. We're going to look at autofocus in a moment. Let's first have a look at the white balance. And here we can choose the exact Kelvin temperature, so we can decrease the white balance to get a cooler look, or increase the white balance to get a warmer look. Okay, going down we have focus, and we can scroll on this wheel to take it out of autofocus and use manual focus. So you can see here I'm focusing between the two different cups. One thing to note as well is you can double tap on any of these settings to set it back to default or auto. Okay, now I'm just going to show you focus peaking, so we can enable and disable this by hitting the settings button, and then going down to focus peaking, and let's enable this. And with focus peaking, we can see with the screen display what area is going to be in focus. So for example, this allows us to quickly focus between these two cups. One thing to note though is this focus peaking can be a bit distracting for the other settings. So if you were to change the ISO, for example, the focus peaking will still be there and you may not be able to see the image quite as clear. So if you are going to have focus peaking on, I do recommend adjusting the focus last once you've properly exposed the rest of the image. Going back to settings, we can also choose to have grids. This won't show up on the video, but can be a useful guide for your subjects. These grids also have a small level meter, which can be quite useful. I personally use the thirds grid, but there are a few other ones here you can choose. Okay, going back to the settings, we do have highlight clipping and shadow clipping. So this will show you the clipping for the shadows and highlighted area, and this can be a useful guide to help you avoid any shadow or highlight clipping. Okay, going down, I'm going to turn off stabilization as the phone is propped up. I'm not using this handheld and it can crop in some of the image. However, if I was shooting handheld, I would enable stabilization. Then for bitrate, I'm going to choose high as it will be higher quality. And then going down, I like to display the histogram, waveform and audio levels. So I'm going to make sure these are enabled. Okay, so these are the main settings that I would use. And you can see here it's displaying some of the clipping information. I do find this a little distracting though, so I'm going to turn off highlight clipping and shadow clipping. Obviously the video doesn't record with any of this information, it's just for you to set up your video. Okay, now let's actually save this as a preset. So let's hit the preset button and then click on create a new preset. And here I'm just going to name this garden and then hit done. And you can see here our custom settings such as frames per second, shutter speed, ISO, and white balance. So now we have a preset. If we were to film in the same location at the same time of day, we could open up this preset. Or we could use this preset as a guide and then tweak from there. Okay, now if I hit this rotate button, you can see it's the front facing camera. Here I am. And we have a few settings on the front facing camera, such as exposure and white balance. With this phone, I can't use manual focus for the front-facing camera, but we can change the shutter speed and the ISO as well. And of course, we have an audio meter on the left, which can be useful to meter your audio and make sure your audio doesn't clip or peak. And one more thing to note, with some iPhones, you can also select multiple cameras. So if you're using an iPhone with 3 different cameras, for example, you can select the different camera setting, which would be up here next to this rotate button. But on this phone, I just have one camera, so I don't have that option. However, you may have this up here, depending on what iPhone you have. Now let's hit record. Another thing to note, you can hit this settings button whilst you're recording, which allows you to adjust some of the settings during the recording. So for example, I could swap the focus whilst I'm recording, which can be a useful feature. And if we stop this recording now, our video will be saved to the camera roll. You can see here the video has been saved. If I tap on this, it will take me to my camera roll. And from here, I can play back this video, and we have a few more options such as delete and share. Now let's just play this back. And we can go back to the video settings by hitting this small camera button in the top right. Okay, another thing to note, if you tap on the screen, this will bring up this small ring, which allows you to lock in your focus and exposure. So this will adjust the focus and exposure at once. If you tap and hold on this, you can see the ring will go blue, and this allows you to lock in your focus and exposure. But if you tap with two fingers, it will give you two separate settings, one for focus and the other for exposure. And same again, if you tap and hold, this will lock the focus here, and then we can tap and hold, and this will lock the exposure. So with this, you can quickly lock your focus and also lock your exposure to make sure part of your video isn't overexposed. Okay, so that is an overview of the Moment Pro app. It does have a lot of features and can be really useful if you want to film with your iPhone. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.